welcome to SVG-TV News for Wednesday, the 29th of August, 2018. I am Jennifer Richardson with the details. Critics of the Caribbean Court of Justice are being encouraged to use tonight's town hall meeting to air their concerns. This request from veteran lawyer Parnel Campbell QC as he spoke on his Law and Due program on SVG-TV on Monday. Campbell, who is a strong advocate for the CCJ as this country's final court of appeal, believes that those who are still not convinced would have a good opportunity to ventilate their objections and receive appropriate responses. Tonight's town hall meeting is being spearheaded by the local bar association and the CCJ as an exercise in public education about the regional institution, and will have the court's recently installed president, Justice Adrian Saunders, as the main presenter. Campbell said the meeting, which takes place at French's House from 7 p.m., will give critics a chance to say why they're against the court.
If you don't want the CCJ, by all means come along to the town hall meeting, express your point of view, and tell Justice Saunders why you don't support the CCJ. Perhaps he may have things to tell you that you probably haven't heard before. He may or may not make you change your mind, but at least you would be better informed so that you can stand up and say, I don't support the CCJ because of A, B, C, and D. Or I support the CCJ because of A, B, C, and D. So I am looking forward with bated breath to the visit of Justice Saunders this week. And I hope the critics of the CCJ would come out and put their points to the learned gentleman and hear what he has to say about it. And it is not enough for us to simply say we don't want it. Let the public hear you say why you don't want it.
Campbell said legal practitioners around the region are impressed with the work done by the CCJ in its original and appellate jurisdictions. He said it is the responsibility of each citizen to learn more about the court by obtaining information from a variety of authentic sources, including its website.
The CCJ has a website. If you want to find it, just Google Caribbean Court of Justice and then go on to the topic judgments in its appellate jurisdiction. You'll be able to see all the judgments in its original jurisdiction, which it delivered from 2005 until a few weeks ago. But more importantly, you would be able to see the judgments delivered by the CCJ in its appellate jurisdiction. And for those of us who have been studying the law for some time, we are highly impressed with the quality of the judgments by the CCJ.
Campbell also pointed to a recent case involving the Trinidad and Tobago Chief Justice and the sentiments expressed by the Privy Council when they handed down their decision.
Here is the Privy Council itself agreeing with the Trinidad and Tobago Court of Appeal on a certain issue which came before the Privy Council. And in agreeing with the Trinidad and Tobago Court of Appeal, the Privy Council said, look, the local courts in Trinidad and Tobago are far better placed to decide what the informed observer in Trinidad and Tobago would make of the matters complained of. And if the local courts are of one view, it is not for the Privy Council to disagree with the local courts. That is what they are saying in this judgment.
The World Pediatric Project, the WPP, in collaboration with the Ministry of Health, will be conducting a free orthopedic clinic on Sunday, September 2nd at the Milton Cater Memorial Hospital. This clinic will be for children up to the age of 21. Director of the WPP's Eastern Caribbean program, Jacqueline Brown-King, tells SVG-TV News that the mission will evaluate children with clubfoot, severe bow legs, and unequal legs. King is encouraging parents to get an early diagnosis before Sunday in order to get treatment and, if necessary, surgery.
Okay, for those persons who would be desirous to come to the clinic, of course, they can call us first because they would need images based on the area of injury or of deformity. So they need to call us so that they can get the images done. Even if they didn't have, then we could probably work with Dr. Woods to see how we can get that done so that they could be seen within the week.
King says that there are patients from St. Kitts, St. Lucia, Dominica and Grenada who will be attending the clinic, which will be for 1 day. Patients identified for corrective surgery will have the surgery done between Monday to Thursday by a visiting orthopedic specialist from St. Louis, Missouri, USA.
They have an idea of some of the surgical candidates, but on Sunday it will give us a better picture and how they will be scheduled throughout the week. Of course, they tend to do more difficult cases first, so they have a longer time to observe and to monitor before they leave.
This is the second year that the World Pediatric Project is hosting an orthopedic mission in SVG. However, they have been actively working in the country for the past 16 years. Health psychologist Dr. Jozelle Miller is calling for a return to the inculcation of morals and sound values in children to empower them to later make wise sexual decisions. This, as recently released figures show that this country recorded 31 new cases of the HIV/AIDS virus for the period January to June, as against 14 during the same period the previous year. Dr. Miller said the moral fabric of society has been significantly eroded, leading persons to make unwise sexual decisions, thus increasing the spread of the virus. Dr. Miller said since children are the future of the nation, they must be given the moral guidance needed to make wise decisions as they progress through life.
Principle, the moral fabric of our society is deteriorating. It has virtually disappeared. And when we see young kids are being glorified for vulgarity, then that's a concern. Because when certain things were set aside for adult expressions only, and now adults are finding pleasure in looking at little kids, little girls bending over and dancing in the most lewd and provocative ways, and that's a clap and a hooray and oh, she bad, she hot, is a hot girl, whatever. That tells me that in the next 5-10 years, what are we going to be seeing? And if we are not careful now to start nipping some of these things in the bud, the horse has left the stable, but we have to try and pull it back as best as we can. And it goes back to teaching right from wrong, principles. Moral principles need to be re-established, and people understand that, consequences are there for your behavior.
And psychologist Kimberley said children are bombarded with negative influences, including through the music they hear while traveling to and from school, that can subtly influence behavior. She said much of the music played is sexually explicit.
When that occurs, of course, if this is something that you are hearing repeatedly over and over again, it begins to have an impact. The impact is, of course, implicit, but the music is explicit. Do you understand? So it's if you keep hearing something being repeated to you over and over again, sometimes we don't even know it, but we begin to have inherent biases towards certain things. And that is something that we don't really like to talk about, but it's something that actually happens. And of course, again, if the music is talking about having sex without protection, or not liking to have sex with condoms, or if you're seen as a certain particular, or if you're seen in a particular manner because you are able to get X amount of girls, I think one of the songs is saying something about 10 men and I have to be 11, something like that. When the music goes that way, then they're saying there's nothing really wrong with that type of lewd behavior. And that, of course, is going to influence, our young men and also the young women.
Cambridge said sexual education from the level of the school system, along with parental guidance, are critical to promoting sexual responsibility.
schools and at home as well, parents begin to have very frank discussions with their children about the fact that HIV is one of the major sexually transmitted diseases that you can catch. And it's not the only sexually transmitted disease that you can catch, but one that has long-lasting consequences. Then I think that children are also going to be able to listen, because if it is that they're getting their sex education from the vans and the music, then it kind of belittles what happens in the school, especially if the music is something that they listen to non-stop. So the school has to be louder than the music. The parents, they have to be louder than the music. And they have to give very frank and open discussions to their children about what unsafe sexual practices can do, because it's better for the children to hear it from their parents than for them to learn about it on the internet, where there are no parental controls, from other children who may not have proper sex education, or from the music that does not technically cater to safe sexual practices.
Meanwhile, Dr. Jozelle Miller is calling on persons to pay attention to the wisdom of the ABC prevention message of abstinence, being faithful, and using a condom. Dr. Miller said the advocacy for abstinence is on the decline and believed its reintroduction is apt as many persons are engaged in sexual activity but are not prepared for the consequences.
Persons are running about having sex, you're not ready for sex. And that's the truth. Persons are having sex because why? You think it's something, it's a fad, it's something that everybody else is doing, so I need to do it. But then you're not really prepared for the implications, the consequences that comes with having sex. And then, God forbid, if I have to go down into issues like carnival and parties where people are now applying alcohol and drugs, and that takes away their inhibitions and their judgment. So then sex becomes something that, okay, just happens. And people use that excuse a lot. Oh, it just happened, I didn't plan it. Sex doesn't just happen. It's a mental process. And even if your inhibitions are gone in terms of your safety, your judgment or responsibility for your own safety goes out the door, even whilst you are involved in sexual activity, at some point, you know what you're doing, unless you're being raped.
Dr. Miller said many persons who desire to have a deep connection often capitulate, and this in turn leads to poor sexual decisions. The psychologist said the findings from her PhD thesis suggest that many persons forego abstinence and use of condoms to secure the relationship, which exposes many to HIV/AIDS and other sexually transmitted diseases.
Then another flip of it is that you hear persons are saying you cement the relationship when the condoms go out. So now we are having, as we say, flesh-to-flesh sex, because that tells me now that you are my one and only. But what generally happens when persons begin to cheat and they begin to look outside of the relationship, they are not practicing safe sex with the other partners as well. What is happening is that they're going out and they're having unprotected sex, and it brings back whatever, you know, they would have contracted out there into the dynamic of that relationship. So, you know, whilst persons should be safe in a relationship that they are committed to for years, because some persons will have been in a relationship for 5-10 years, or you're married and you should feel safe, that safety goes out the door if one partner, you know, has his or her indiscretions.
Unsafe indiscretions.
Unsafe indiscretions, exactly that.
Meanwhile, psychologist Kimberley Cambridge took the opportunity to encourage testing and other tried and tested methods.
Then do the right thing. 1, get tested. 2, if you must insist on continuing to have sex with multiple partners, use a condom. We can't emphasize this enough. Ladies, if the gentleman does not have a condom, walk with your own. You have all the opportunity to have your own condom as well. So it is really encouraged to take your own condoms, give one to the gentleman if necessary. There are female condoms, there are male condoms. So you have to take control of your own sexual health as much as possible. And I think that is really important. Again, Dr. Miller mentioned it all. Abstinence is also key. You can't get HIV or AIDS if you are abstinent. If you're not engaging in risky sexual practices whatsoever, then you cannot get the disease. So abstinence is still key to reducing the risk of course, anything sexually transmitted. So you definitely have to take responsibility for your own sexual health.
The National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, is investigating the after effects of last week's earth tremor, which caused some damage to structures in Trinidad. The field investigations follow at least 3 reports of possible damage to structures here that may be linked to the 7.3 magnitude earthquake which originated in Venezuela. NEMO's director, Michelle Forbes, said they got no reports in the immediate aftermath, but later some persons indicated there may have been some damage.
We had 1 or 2 reports coming in, but we have to investigate to see whether they were actually caused by the earthquake or whether those structures would have already cracked before. So we had about 3 reports of cracks in buildings, so we have to investigate those to see whether they're really from the earthquake or not, or something that was pre-existing.
Forbes said a team of inspectors was identified and yesterday began to carry out structural inspections. The inspectors will then report their findings to determine whether any further steps are needed.
We should have some information by tomorrow, so at least we'll do a preliminary visit. Those guys would have gone out already to do a preliminary visit, and then if there's anything that we need to follow up, and we'll ask the engineers from another ministry to give us a feedback or give us a report on those.
Forbes is encouraging all Vincentians to be aware of their surroundings and always check on their buildings for any structural damage. She said this is a key element in earthquake awareness.
So after earthquakes, you always inspect your buildings to ensure that nothing unusual has happened, no cracks, because that means that if that happens, then something is probably structurally wrong with your building, or there may have been some shifting somewhere in the soil, and you tend to feel earthquakes more around the coastal areas and reclaimed land, so like Kingstown and those areas, you'll tend to feel an earthquake much more stronger because the soil is looser, and you'll tend to feel the earthquake much more. So we ask persons not to panic. Once there's an earthquake, do the drop, cover and hold, move away from buildings, move away from structures that can actually fall on you, and also to just ensure that you're safe and your surroundings are safe before you enter back the building.
The 7.3 magnitude earthquake was felt in several Caribbean countries, including SVG, and an aftershock of 5.9 was also felt in SVG the following day. The police have arrested and yesterday jointly charged 2 laborers of Glen for armed robbery. Darren Bristol, 23 years old, and Timothy Nicky, 17, are expected to appear in the magistrate's court. The police said, according to investigations, on August 5th at Villa, Bristol and Nicky robbed a 26-year-old student and a 54-year-old nurse of the USA at gunpoint and made off with $1,690 worth of items from the victims. Nicky was also charged for the abduction of 4 women from the Welcome and Queens Drive area for being armed with a firearm and threatening to discharge the firearm at the women in the process of the abduction. He is charged also for robbing the women, for using a motor vehicle without the consent of the owner and in the process causing damage to the vehicle, and for assaulting 2 of the abducted women by pushing them from the said motor vehicle. Nicky is also charged with robbing a 23-year-old security guard at gunpoint and making off with items valued at over $750.